Taman moved to the interface station before anyone could stop him. His hands shook slightly as he placed them on the activation panels. The ancient technology came alive at his touch, responding to his consciousness, his life force, his will. "Taman, wait," Jiho said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't, you know that." The engineer looked back at his captain, his friend.
"Tell my family I was brave."
"Even if I wasn't, tell them it mattered." "It did matter." "It does," Taman smiled. Then he closed his eyes and initiated the connection. The cold sun blazed to life. Energy poured from the sphere, flowing through Taman's body. His skin began to glow, then to frost over as his body temperature dropped. He gasped in pain but kept his hands steady on the controls. The interface required precise calibration. One mistake and the failsafe would activate incorrectly, destroying everything instead of just the swarm. "Taman." Minji moved toward him, but Doyon held her back. "He's concentrating. Don't break his focus." Outside the structure, the cold sun's power became visible. A wave of quantum cold began spreading from the ancient facility, moving at the speed of light. It passed through the fleet's ships harmlessly. Their technology was too young, too simple to be affected. But when it touched the Ashborn swarm, the entities screamed. The wave severed their dimensional anchoring instantly. Beings of fire and hunger, sustained by connections to another reality, found those connections cut. They froze in place, flames extinguishing, forms solidifying for the first time in millions of years. Then they shattered, dissolving into particles too small to see. Across the galaxy, every Ashborn entity died simultaneously. Those attacking distant systems, those drifting in deep space, those hibernating in dimensional rifts. The cold sun's power reached them all, ending their eternal burning in one perfect moment of absolute zero. In the structure's central chamber, Taman's body was barely recognizable. Ice covered him completely, frost spreading from his hands up his arms across his chest, claiming him degree by degree. But his consciousness remained, guiding the process, ensuring the wave propagated correctly. "Taman, you can let go now," Jiho said softly. "It's working. You did it." The engineer's voice came through the interface, distorted but recognizable. Tell them, engineers. Saved the galaxy." This time, his consciousness faded. The life left his body. But the cold sun continued its work, powered now by the sacrifice he'd made. The wave swept across the entire galaxy, ending the Ashborn swarm completely. Jiho fell to his knees beside the interface station. Around him, his team stood in silence. Outside, the battle had stopped. The fleet floated among the debris, crews staring at sensors that showed the impossible. The swarm was gone. All of it. Everywhere. Hana's voice came through the comm, broken with static and emotion. "Captain, sensors show negative contacts. The swarm is... It's gone." "What happened?" "We won," Jiho replied. "Taman won. He saved us all." The journey back to human space took 5 days. The fleet moved slowly, damaged ships supporting each other. They carried wounded, dead, and the weight of survival. News of the victory spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The Concordat Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in their history, they offered a formal apology to an entire species. Ambassador Soman stood before the assembled representatives of 17 suns and accepted their words with cold dignity. "Humanity doesn't need your apology," she said. "We need your respect. We need you to remember that every species has value, regardless of how primitive you think they are. We need you to understand that stories matter, history matters, and the things you dismiss as superstition might someday save your lives." The council granted humanity full membership. They offered a permanent seat on the High Council. They offered trade agreements, technology sharing, military alliances. Earth accepted some offers and rejected others, establishing humanity as equals rather than supplicants. But the political victories felt hollow to those who had fought. Jiho returned to Earth a hero. Parades, medals, interview requests from across the galaxy. He declined most of them. Instead, he attended funerals. Hundreds of funerals for the ships and crews that hadn't made it home. Taman's memorial service was held in Seoul, in the rain. His family stood at the front, accepting condolences from strangers. His mother held the Medal of Honor they'd given him, the highest award humanity could bestow. She looked at Jiho with eyes full of grief and gratitude. "He always wanted to make a difference," she said. "He always said engineers were the ones who actually fixed things while everyone else talked about it." He was right, Jiho replied. He fixed everything. Hana attended the service in her dress uniform, wearing Jinwoo's flight badge alongside her own medals. She had been promoted to admiral, the youngest in human history. The promotion felt like punishment rather than reward. Later at the reception, she found Jiho standing alone. They want me to command the new defense fleet, build humanity's military for the next war. Will you do it? Probably. Someone has to. Might as well be someone who remembers why we fight. Admiral Yunho retired after the war. He said he was too old for politics and space battles. He opened a small restaurant in Busan that served terrible coffee and excellent advice to young officers seeking wisdom. Dr. Minji's research became required reading at every university in the Concordat. Her book, The Importance of Cultural Memory and Mythology, was translated into 43 languages. She spent her later years traveling to different worlds, helping alien species rediscover their own forgotten stories. Lieutenant Borum went back to special operations. Some people were just built for dangerous work. But he carried a small photo of his lost team members, and before every mission he touched it for luck. Doyen stayed in communications, eventually becoming Earth's primary liaison to the Concordat. He had a talent for translation and diplomacy, for finding the words that built bridges between species. Ambassador Soman continued her work, now with considerably more authority. She made sure that humanity's voice was heard in every galactic decision. She made sure no one forgot the price of dismissing others as primitive. The memorial for all the fallen was built on Earth's moon, a simple stone wall with names carved in multiple languages. At the center stood a statue of Taman, his hands on an interface panel, his face serene. The inscription read, "He gave everything so others could give nothing." Years passed. The Ashbourne War became history, then legend. Children learned about it in schools. The dramatic space battles, the brave sacrifices, the moment humanity proved itself to the galaxy. But the people who lived through it remembered differently. They remembered the terror, the impossible choices, the friends who didn't come home. They remembered that victory always costs more than anyone wants to pay. Jiho eventually retired from active service. He became a teacher at the military academy, instructing young officers in strategy and tactics. He always began his courses the same way. Never dismiss what others call myths, he told each new class. Never assume that old stories are just entertainment. Every legend holds truth. Every culture preserves wisdom in their own way. The galaxy learned that lesson the hard way. You need to remember it. His students listened, most of them too young to have lived through the war. They studied the tactics, analyzed the battles, memorized the lessons. Some understood, some didn't. That was the way of teaching. One day a young cadet raised her hand. "Sir, why did humans solve the problem when more advanced species couldn't?" Jiho thought about all the answers he could give. Superior tactics, clever improvisation, desperate courage. All of them were true. None of them were complete. "Because we never forgot," he said finally. While other species reached for the stars and left their history behind, humans kept our feet in the soil where stories grow. We remembered what they chose to forget. Sometimes remembering matters more than advancing. "But we're advanced now too," the cadet said. "We have better ships, newer technology. Are we starting to forget like they did?" It was a good question. A worrying question. Jiho looked out the window at Earth below, blue and green and beautiful. A world that had preserved its myths, its legends, its stories through thousands of years of change. "That's up to you," he told the cadet. "Your generation will decide what to keep and what to leave behind. Just remember that the old stories saved us once. They might need to save us again." The class ended. Students filed out, chattering about assignments and upcoming exams. Jiho stayed behind, looking at a photo on his desk. His crew from the Horizon's Promise. All of them smiling before the war, before the burning, before they learned the cost of heroism. Taman stood at the center of the photo, grinning, holding a wrench like a trophy. Jiho touched the image gently. "We remembered," he whispered. "Because of you, the galaxy will remember too." Outside, Earth continued its rotation. Cities glowed with light. Ships launched toward distant stars. Children played games inspired by ancient myths. Grandparents told stories to grandchildren, stories of fire and ice, of courage and sacrifice, of the time when humanity saved the galaxy by remembering what others forgot. The cycle continued. Stories became legends. Legends became myths. And somewhere, someday, when the galaxy needed them again, the myths would become truth once more. The fleet traveled through empty space for 3 days. In the command center of the Soul's Wrath, Jiho watched tactical displays and tried not to think about everything that could go wrong. The plan was simple in theory. Reach the dead star system before the swarm. Find whatever made it important. Use that knowledge to end this. Reality was never that simple. They encountered the first swarm scouts on day 2. Small entities barely the size of fighters, detached from the main force to investigate. Hana's squadron engaged them while the fleet continued forward. The cryo-weapons worked better than expected. The scouts froze and shattered, their dimensional anchoring severed by the quantum cold. But each battle taught the swarm something new. The entities adapted, moving differently, avoiding the worst of the cryo-beams. They're learning. Hana reported after the 3rd engagement, getting harder to hit. Taman made adjustments to the weapons between battles. The fleet engineers shared notes, combining human improvisation with alien precision. The weapons improved, but so did the swarm's tactics. Dr. Minji worked from her lab on the Soul's Wrath, surrounded by ancient texts and alien databases. She barely slept, driven by the certainty that answers existed somewhere in humanity's preserved memories. I found something, she told Jiho during the 3rd night. The ancient texts don't just describe the swarm. They describe what created it. She pulled up images from Korean shamanic traditions, Chinese alchemical texts, and Persian astronomical records. Our ancestors called them the first makers, beings who existed before current civilizations. They built weapons to fight their wars, weapons that were alive, weapons made of fire and hunger. The Ashborn swarm was a weapon, is a weapon. Past tense doesn't apply to something this old. The first makers created these entities to destroy their enemies. But the weapons became too powerful, too independent. They turned on their creators. So the first makers are extinct? Probably. But before they died, they built a failsafe, a way to neutralize all their weapons at once. They called it different names in different cultures. The cold sun, the frozen star, the fire's end. And they hid it in that star system we're heading toward. Jiho leaned back in his chair. Why hide clues on Earth? Why leave messages for humans specifically? Insurance. The first makers seeded developing worlds across the galaxy with information. They hoped at least one species would preserve the knowledge long enough to use it. Most species forgot as they advanced. We remembered because humans can't resist a good story. Do we know how to activate this failsafe? Minji hesitated. The texts are unclear. But there's a common theme. Someone has to interface with it directly. The failsafe requires, I think the word translates best as sacrifice. It needs a life to take a life. Someone has to die to activate it. Yes. Jiho didn't tell his crew. Not yet. First they needed to reach the system. First they needed to survive the swarm. They arrived on the 4th day. The dead star system was exactly as boring as the databases claimed. A brown dwarf that barely qualified as a star. 3 barren planets locked in tight orbits. Asteroid fields, dust. Nothing that explained why the swarm was coming here. Then the scanners found the structure. It floated near the 3rd planet, hidden in a dust cloud that interfered with sensors. The size of a small moon, part machine and part something else. Organic components twisted through metal frameworks. Power signatures that shouldn't exist pulsed through impossible geometries. What is that thing? Admiral Yunho breathed. The Forge of First Fire, Minji whispered. It's real. It's actually real. The structure was beautiful and terrifying. It had been here for millions of years, waiting. Parts of it were damaged, destroyed by time and isolation, but the core remained intact, radiating energy that made reality bend around it. Sir, the swarm is here, Tactical reported. Multiple rifts opening throughout the system. The Ashborn swarm arrived like a nightmare-given form. Hundreds of entities poured through dimensional tiers, larger than anything they'd faced before. The main force had come and it wanted whatever was inside that ancient structure. All ships, battle formation, Jiho ordered. We hold them here. The battle began. Admiral Yunho commanded the capital ships, arranging them in a defensive sphere around the structure. The Soul's Wrath and its sisters fired cryoweapons in coordinated volleys, creating zones of deadly cold that the swarm had to navigate around. Wing Commander Nari led the alien fighters while Hana commanded the human squadrons. They flew intricate patterns covering each other, drawing swarm entities into kill zones where the cryo-weapons could do maximum damage. It wasn't enough. The swarm was too large, too powerful. For every entity they destroyed, 3 more came through the rifts. Ships began to die. First small patrol craft, then frigates, then larger vessels. The Vrellan cruiser Determination took a direct hit, its hull consumed by living flame. 200 crew members died in seconds. "We can't hold this position," Yunho said grimly. "We need to fall back." "Negative," Jiho replied. "If the swarm reaches that structure, we lose our only chance. We hold. At what cost?" "Everything if necessary." In the fighter squadrons, Hana watched her wingman Jinwoo die. His fighter took damage, lost control, drifted into a stream of fire. She saw him eject, saw his escape pod tumble toward safety. Then another entity caught the pod and there was nothing left but ash. "Jinwoo is gone," she reported, her voice flat. Emotions later. Survival now. Taemin worked frantically on the Soul's Wrath, rerouting power, improving weapons, fixing damage as fast as the swarm could cause it. His engineering crews were exhausted, running on stimulants and sheer determination. Injuries piled up. Equipment failed. They kept working. Lieutenant Borum's strike team held a damaged section of a Concordat cruiser, fighting off boarding entities that had managed to manifest inside the ship. His team used improvised cryo-weapons at close range, freezing the entities before they could spread. 3 of his soldiers died, buying time for the rest to escape. The battle raged for hours. The fleet's defensive sphere slowly contracted, ships pulling closer together as their numbers dwindled. They had destroyed hundreds of swarm entities. Thousands more remained. "Sir, I need permission to lead a boarding team," Jiho said to Yunho. "Someone has to reach the structure. Find the failsafe. Your tactical commander. You can't, someone has to do it. That structure is the key to ending this." Yunho was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. "Take whoever you need. We'll buy you time." Jiho assembled his team quickly, Borum and what remained of his strike force. Taemin because they'd need an engineer, Doyun to handle any communication systems, and Dr. Minji because she was the only one who might understand the First Maker's technology. They took a small assault shuttle flying through the chaos of battle toward the ancient structure. Swarm entities tried to intercept them, but Hana's squadron ran interference, sacrificing their own safety to keep the shuttle clear. "Go," Hana shouted over the comm as her fighter took damage. "We'll keep them busy." The shuttle docked with the structure through a damaged port. Jiho's team entered carefully, weapons ready. Inside was darkness lit by pulsing energy. The architecture was alien beyond description. Walls curved in directions that hurt to look at. Gravity shifted unpredictably. Time felt wrong, moving faster in some areas and slower in others. "Stay close," Jiho ordered. "Don't touch anything unless Minji says it's safe." They moved deeper into the structure, following energy readings that Taemin tracked on his scanner. The deeper they went, the more intact the technology became. And the more they saw evidence of what this place truly was: manufacturing facilities for weapons, biological laboratories, testing chambers where horrific things had been created. The First Makers hadn't just built the Ashborn swarm. They had built thousands of weapons, each more terrible than the last. "This was a factory," Borum said quietly. "A factory for making monsters." "And somewhere in here is the emergency stop," Minji replied. "Keep moving." They found it in the central chamber, a sphere of crystal and metal, hovering in the middle of a massive room. Energy flowed around it in patterns that created music, if music could hurt your soul to hear. "The cold sun," Minji breathed. "The failsafe." Taemin scanned it with every sensor he had. "It's dormant. Needs activation. But the interface..." He pointed to a station beneath the sphere. "It's biological. Needs a living consciousness to operate. Can you activate it remotely?" "No, someone has to interface directly." "And Jiho?" Taemin's voice broke slightly. "The power draw is massive. It'll drain everything from whoever connects. Life, energy, consciousness, everything," Jiho understood. This was the sacrifice the ancient texts mentioned. Someone had to die to activate the cold sun. Someone had to give their life to save everyone else. Outside, the battle was reaching its peak. The fleet had been reduced to 30 ships. They were surrounded, outmatched, dying by degrees. But they kept fighting because humans didn't know how to quit. Inside the structure, Jiho looked at his team. These people who had followed him into hell without question. He was their captain, their leader. The responsibility was his. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "No." Taman stepped forward. "It needs someone who understands the technology, someone who can make sure the interface is stable. That's me, Taman." The Concordat research station floated in empty space, a gray sphere covered in sensor arrays. It looked peaceful, boring even. Exactly what you'd expect from a remote facility studying banned technologies far from prying eyes. Lieutenant Borum checked his equipment one last time. The infiltration specialist had done this kind of work before, but never against the Concordat itself. Breaking into alien government facilities was generally considered a bad career move. "Ready?" Jiho asked over the comm. "Ready to commit intergalactic crimes, sir." "Yes." Borum's team moved through space in stealth suits, tiny thrusters guiding them toward the station's maintenance airlock. Taman had identified it as the weakest point in security. The engineer was currently hacking the station's network from the Horizon's Promise, feeding false data to their sensors. The airlock opened. Borum slipped inside, his team following like ghosts. Inside the station, researchers went about their work unaware. Most were focused on their own projects, separated by security clearances and need-to-know protocols. The cryo-dimensional research lab was in the deepest section, protected by guards and locked doors. "Security feed is looped," Taman reported. "You have 15 minutes before their system notices the glitch." Borum moved fast. His team disabled 2 guards with neural stunners, leaving them sleeping peacefully in a storage closet. They bypassed 3 security doors using codes Taman had extracted from the network. Everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly. The cryo-dimensional lab was exactly where the files said it would be. Shelves held prototype weapons and cases of research data. Borum started downloading everything to portable drives while his team grabbed the physical prototypes. 10 minutes, Taman warned. "We need more time. There's too much data. You don't have more time. Security protocols are starting to notice something's wrong." Borum swore in Korean. "Grab everything you can carry. We're leaving in 3 minutes whether we're done or not." "That's when the alarm started. They know you're there," Taman shouted. "Station is going into lockdown." Doors slammed shut throughout the facility. Borum's team was trapped in the lab with half the data and 3 prototype weapons. Security forces were already moving toward their position. "Blow the wall," Borum ordered. "Sir, we're in space." "That will, I know. Do it anyway." They placed shaped charges on the outer wall, cleared back, and detonated. The explosion was violent and beautiful. Metal tore away, atmosphere screamed out into vacuum, and Borum's team was sucked toward the opening along with research equipment, furniture, and everything not bolted down. Their suits saved them. Magnetic anchors fired, catching on surviving metal. They pulled themselves through the breach and activated emergency thrusters, rocketing away from the station as security forces reached the destroyed lab. The Horizon's Promise swooped in, bay doors open. Borum's team tumbled inside, clutching stolen weapons and data drives. The ship was already accelerating before the doors fully closed. Concordat patrol ships appeared from stealth, weapons armed. They had been waiting. "They knew we were coming," Jiho said grimly. "It was a trap. Can we fight them?" Hana asked. "No, we run." The Horizon's Promise wasn't built for combat or speed, but Hana flew it like a fighter craft anyway. They dodged weapons fire, ducked behind asteroids, and burned their engines at dangerous levels. The patrol ships followed, faster and better armed. "Incoming transmission from the lead patrol ship," Doyun reported. An alien face appeared on screen. The patrol commander looked furious. "Terran vessel, you have committed theft and assault against Concordat property. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded." Jiho stood slowly. "We stole weapons you refused to give us while worlds burned. Tell me, Commander, how many people died while your council debated proper protocol? That's not your decision to make. Someone had to make it." Jiho cut the transmission. More patrol ships were converging on their position. There was no way to escape all of them. The Horizon's Promise was going to be captured, and with it, any hope of using the cryo-weapons against the swarm. Then Earth's fleet arrived. 20 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, positioning themselves between the Horizon's Promise and the Concordat patrol. The flagship was the Soul's Wrath, commanded by Admiral Yunho. His face appeared on Jiho's screen, stern and formal. "Captain Jiho, proceed to Earth immediately. We'll handle things here. Admiral, they'll consider this an act of war." Let them. Yunho smiled coldly. Premier Heejin has already made a public statement. Earth stands with you. The transmission changed to a recorded speech. Premier Heejin stood in front of Earth's United Government building, speaking to cameras broadcasting across the galaxy. The Concordat calls humanity primitive, she said. They dismiss our history as superstition and our courage as recklessness. While they debated in their chambers, our people acted. Captain Jiho and his crew did what needed to be done. They took knowledge the Concordat hoarded and will use it to save lives. If that makes us criminals in the eyes of the galaxy, so be it. We would rather be criminals than cowards. The speech continued, but Jiho didn't hear the rest. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. Earth had just isolated itself politically, possibly started a war, and all to support one captain's desperate gamble. Sir, we need to move, Hana said gently. The Horizon's Promise fled toward Earth while the Soul's Wrath and Concordat patrol ships faced each other in tense standoff. No shots were fired, not yet, but the galaxy held its breath. Back on Earth, Taemin and Dr. Minji worked frantically to adapt the stolen technology. The prototypes were designed for large warships, not small craft. They needed to miniaturize, simplify, and make them work with human systems. This is impossible, Taemin said for the 10th time. You keep saying that, Minji replied. You also keep making progress. The first working prototype was installed on Hana's fighter. She took it to the test range, aimed at a target drone, and fired. The beam that emerged wasn't visible exactly. It was the absence of light, the opposite of fire. Where it touched the drone, molecules stopped moving. Temperature dropped to absolute zero in milliseconds. The drone froze solid, then shattered into dust. It works, Hana breathed. It actually works. More prototypes were built. Every Terran warship received at least one cryo-weapon. Fighter craft were retrofitted. Engineers worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and desperation. Then Minji made her second discovery. She had been analyzing the swarm's attack patterns, comparing them to ancient star charts found in Earth's archaeological records, Chinese astronomical texts, Korean celestial maps, Polynesian navigation guides. All of them marked specific star systems as significant. They're not random attacks, she told Jiho over video link. The swarm is following a pattern. They're going to specific places in a specific order, hunting something or going somewhere. Look at this. She overlaid the attack pattern with the ancient charts. Every system they've hit appears in multiple Earth civilizations' astronomical records. Systems marked as important, though we never knew why, and they're all leading to one place. She highlighted a star system on the edge of known space. It was listed in Concordat databases as unremarkable. A dead star, a few rocky planets, nothing worth visiting. But in Earth's ancient texts, it had dozens of names. The Forge of First Fire, the place where stars die, the origin of flame. That's where they're going, Minji said. That's the swarm's final target. What's there? I don't know. But our ancestors thought it was important enough to remember for thousands of years. Jiho studied the map. If Minji was right, they could predict the swarm's next moves. They could get ahead of the attacks instead of always responding too late. They could reach this dead star system first and figure out what made it so important. How long until the swarm reaches it? Based on their current speed and pattern, 4 days. 4 days to prepare. 4 days to convince the Concordat to work with them instead of arresting them. 4 days to figure out how to stop entities that had burned civilizations millions of years ago. Ambassador Soman returned from the council chambers looking exhausted. The political situation was a disaster. Half the Concordat wanted to arrest all humans. The other half was just confused. But the Ashbourne swarm didn't care about politics. 3 more systems had fallen. Billions were dead or fleeing. They're going to let us try, Soman finally said. Not because they trust us, because they're out of other options. That's good enough, Jiho replied. Earth's military mobilized everything. 73 warships, including the Soul's Wrath. Fighter squadrons led by Hana and Wing Commander Nari. Support vessels, medical ships, and supply transports. It was humanity's entire space navy. Barely enough to matter in galactic terms, but it was all they had. Grudgingly, Concordat species began to join them. The Vrellan sent their surviving ships, grateful for the rescue at their homeworld. Other species contributed ships, crews, and hope. For the first time in galactic history, a human was given command of a multi-species fleet. Admiral Yunho appointed Jiho as tactical commander, and to everyone's surprise, the alien captains accepted the assignment. Why? Jiho asked Yunho privately. The Admiral smiled. Because you proved something at Vrelin. You proved humans don't give up. Sometimes that matters more than technology or experience. Dr. Minji's face appeared on the view screen, her hair messy from sleep. Back on Earth, it was 3 a.m. She blinked at the camera, confused why a military captain was calling her research lab. Dr. Minji, I'm Captain Jiho. I need you to tell me everything you know about fire spirits in human mythology. She stared at him. Is this a joke? I wish it was. Jiho transferred files to her station. Look at these images. Tell me what you see. Minji opened the tactical footage. Her confusion changed to shock, then to something like recognition. She zoomed in on one of the entities, studying its shape within the flames. That's impossible, she whispered. It's happening anyway. Minji stood up, suddenly awake. She moved around her small apartment, pulling books from shelves and opening files on multiple screens. Give me 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Jiho watched her work while his crew held position near Vrelin space. The planet below was evacuating, streams of ships fleeing into the void. The Ashborn swarm had pulled back after the debris field explosion, but everyone knew this was temporary. They were regrouping. Hana brought him coffee that tasted like recycled disappointment. Think the mythology professor can help? She better. We're out of other options. When Minji returned to the screen, she had transformed from sleepy academic to focused researcher. She had notes, images, and a look of terrible certainty. They visited us, she said without preamble. These things, or things like them, came to Earth thousands of years ago. Explain. Minji pulled up images from ancient texts, Korean paintings of fire spirits, Chinese legends of the Zhuke, Persian tales of the Simurgh, Egyptian stories of the Bennu. Dozens of cultures separated by oceans and centuries, all describing the same thing. We thought these were just myths, she said. Stories primitive people told to explain things they didn't understand. But look at the details, the way the flames move, the shapes inside the fire, the sound they make. It's all there in the old texts. Perfect descriptions of what you're seeing now. Jiho leaned forward. You're saying ancient humans encountered these entities before? Not just these. I've been researching this for years. Dozens of Earth's myths match extinct alien species in the concordant databases. Dragons that sound exactly like the Velcrin serpents, giants that match the Titan collective, sea monsters that could be the abyssal devourers, all species that supposedly went extinct millions of years ago. But they visited Earth first. Yes. And humans remembered. We wrote it down, painted it on cave walls, carved it into stone. Every culture preserved these encounters in their own way. We kept the stories alive even when we didn't understand what they meant. Taemin had joined Jiho at the view screen. Other species must have had similar visits. Why didn't they remember? Minji smiled sadly. Because they became civilized. As species advance, they abandon superstition. They delete old databases, rewrite history to remove embarrassing primitive beliefs. They forget. But humans, we love our stories too much to let them go. Can those stories tell us how to fight these things? Jiho asked. Maybe. Minji worked through multiple files. The legends don't say the fire spirits were defeated exactly. More like they were appeased, driven away? There are common elements across cultures: cold, darkness, the void between stars. Ancient shamans in Korea used water blessed under moonless skies. Persian texts mention ice from the top of the world. Hindu priests spoke of the cold that burns brighter than fire. Taemin's expression shifted. Cold that burns. That's not poetic. That's physics. What do you mean? Jiho asked. The engineer pulled up equations on his console. Extreme cold can create quantum states. When matter approaches absolute zero, it exhibits properties that seem impossible. Superfluidity, superconductivity, zero viscosity. If these entities exist partially in another dimension, certain quantum states might disrupt their anchoring to our reality. Minji nodded excitedly. The myths describe exactly that. Not just cold, but a specific kind of cold. The darkness between stars. That's where temperatures approach absolute zero. So we need cryoweapons, Jiho said. Do we have anything like that? No. Taemin looked frustrated. That kind of technology is theoretical. It would take years to develop. The Concordat might have it, Doyen interjected. He was searching databases frantically. There are references to banned research. Cryo-dimensional weapons were developed 300 years ago by the Concordat Science Division. The project was shut down and all research classified as level red, too dangerous for general use. Jiho stood up. Get me Ambassador Soman. Now. The communication took several minutes to route through proper channels. When Ambassador Soman appeared on screen, she looked tired. The emergency session of the Concordat Council had been going for hours. Captain Jiho, your actions at Vrelin have caused quite a stir. Ma'am, we need access to classified weapons research. Cryo-dimensional technology. Soman's expression hardened. I've been arguing for military assistance for 6 hours. The Council won't even approve sending observer ships. You think they'll hand over banned weapons to humanity? If they don't, more worlds will burn. I know that. You know that. But the Concordat sees humans as barely civilized. They think we're reckless, emotional, and dangerous. Half the Council believes you attacked the swarm because you're too primitive to understand proper threat assessment. Jiho felt anger rising but pushed it down. Then we need to make them understand. Dr. Minji has discovered something important. He explained Minji's research while the ambassador listened. When he finished, Soman was silent for a long moment. You're telling me human mythology predicted this? Not predicted, remembered. Our ancestors met these things before and wrote down what they learned. We preserved knowledge the rest of the galaxy forgot. Soman looked off screen, probably at her advisors. When she turned back, her expression was determined. I'll present this to the Council. But Jiho, they're going to reject it. They'll say human myths are primitive superstition. They'll never admit that your grandmother's folk tales might save them. Then what do? The ambassador smiled grimly. We remind them why humanity survived every disaster our planet threw at us. We didn't wait for permission to be clever. The connection cut off. Taemin looked at Jiho. She's telling us to steal it. That's treason, someone said. That's survival, Jiho corrected. He turned to his crew. I need volunteers for a very illegal mission. If this goes wrong, Earth will disavow us. We'll spend the rest of our lives in Concordat prisons. Anyone who wants off this ship, now's your chance. Nobody moved. Hana grinned from the pilot station. So where are we stealing this technology from? Jiho pulled up star charts. There's a Concordat research station in the Helios sector. Remote, lightly guarded. Taemin, can you crack their security? Probably. I need better than probably. Then definitely. But we'll need a distraction. Something to pull their attention away. On the view screen, the Ashborn swarm was moving again. New rifts were opening. 3 more systems were under attack. Doyen turned pale. Captain, one of those systems is New Busan. That's a human colony. The timing was cruel. The swarm was spreading, and one of its new targets was home to 50,000 Terran civilians. If Jiho diverted to help them, the theft became impossible. But if he went for the weapons, those people would die. How long until the swarm reaches New Busan? He asked quietly. 8 hours. And how long to reach the research station? 4 hours. Plus however long to break in and steal the technology. Jiho closed his eyes. Command meant making impossible choices. It meant weighing lives against lives. 50,000 people against potentially billions. He opened his eyes. We go for the weapons, but we make it fast. Hana, plot the quickest possible route. Taemin, start working on the security systems now. Doyen, send a message to New Busan. Tell them to evacuate immediately. Tell them help is coming. Is it? Someone asked softly. If we succeed, yes. If we fail... Jiho didn't finish the sentence. The Horizon's promise turned away from the burning worlds and headed for the research station. Behind them, the Ashborn swarm continued its ancient, terrible work. And on Earth, Dr. Minji sat surrounded by books of myths and legends, searching for more answers in stories thousands of years old. She thought about her grandmother, who used to tell her these tales when she was small. Back then, she'd thought they were just entertainment. Now she understood. They were warnings, messages from the past, and maybe, just maybe, they were also solutions. The diplomatic chamber gleamed with crystal walls that reflected starlight from 3 different suns. Captain Jiho stood at attention, his Terran uniform simple compared to the elaborate robes of the Vrelin officials surrounding him. He had waited 2 years for this moment. 2 years of applications, rejections, and patient diplomacy. Finally, humanity would sign its first major trade agreement with a galactic power. Beside him, pilot Hana shifted her weight slightly. She hated these formal ceremonies. Her fingers twitched, missing the familiar controls of her fighter craft. On Jiho's other side, engineer Taemin studied the architecture with professional interest, probably calculating load-bearing capacities out of habit. The Vrellan trade minister, a tall being with silver skin and 4 graceful arms, began the signing ceremony. His translator device hummed as he spoke of cooperation and mutual benefit. Jiho allowed himself a small smile. This was it. Humanity's first real step into the galactic community. Then the alarms began. The crystal walls flickered. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. The trade minister's expression shifted from diplomatic warmth to raw terror in seconds. Vrellan guards rushed into the chamber, shouting in their native language. The translator struggled to keep up. Attack, dimensional breach. They're back. The Ashborn. Jiho grabbed Hana's arm. Get to the ship, now. They ran through corridors filling with panicked aliens. Taemin led the way, his internal map of the building flawless as always. Outside, the sky burned, not metaphorically. The sky actually burned. Ribbons of flame tore through the atmosphere, writhing like living serpents. Ships exploded in orbit, their wreckage falling as meteors of twisted metal. The flames didn't behave like normal fire. They moved with purpose, flowing around buildings to engulf fleeing crowds. They passed through shields as if the energy barriers didn't exist. Hana stopped running to stare. What are those things? Myths, Jiho whispered. Then louder, move! The Horizon's Promise sat on the landing pad where they'd left it. The crew was already inside, running emergency pre-flight checks. Jiho slid into the command chair as the ship shuddered to life beneath him. Captain, I'm reading 17-dimensional rifts opening across the planet, reported Doyen from communications. His young face was pale but steady. Vrellan Defense Fleet is engaging. They're losing badly. The view screen showed the battle. Vrellan warships, sleek and powerful, fired their advanced weapons into the firestorms. The flames absorbed the energy and grew brighter. When the fire touched a ship's hull, the metal didn't just melt. It burned away completely, as if reality itself was being consumed. Get us into orbit, Jiho ordered. Battle stations. Hana was already moving toward the fighter bay. Taemin called after her. Your ship isn't armed for this. Then figure something out, she shouted back. The Horizon's Promise rose through the chaos. Around them, civilian transport struggled to escape. A luxury liner, massive and beautiful, tried to punch through the atmosphere. A tendril of flame caught its engines. In seconds, the ship was gone. Not destroyed, gone. Not even debris remained. Captain, we're receiving a priority signal from the Concordat Council, Doyen said. They're debating whether to send help. Jiho's jaw tightened. Debating? They want to assess the threat level first. Determine if intervention is strategically sound. On the screen, another Vrellan warship died screaming. Jiho watched a species considered among the galaxy's finest warriors flee in terror from an enemy they couldn't fight. Sir, what are your orders? His first officer asked. Jiho looked at his crew. 23 humans on one small research vessel. Behind them, a planet of billions burned. Above them, a fleet of hundreds died uselessly. And somewhere far away, the great powers of the galaxy held committee meetings. Contact the other Terran ships in this sector, he said quietly. Tell them we're engaging. Sir, we're not equipped for combat operations, the first officer protested. We have 3 patrol ships and a research vessel. The Vrellan fleet couldn't stop this thing. I know. Jiho pulled up tactical displays. His mind raced through possibilities, discarding most immediately. Taemin, what do we know about fighting fire? The engineer blinked at the apparent non-sequitur. Fire needs fuel and oxygen. In space, these things aren't normal fire. They're some kind of energy beings. But back on Earth, how did ancient humans fight wildfires? Controlled burns, fire breaks, remove the fuel before the fire reaches it. Taemin's eyes widened. You want to use our ships as bait. I want to lure them into that debris field. Jiho highlighted an area on the tactical map where destroyed ships had created a dense cloud of wreckage. You fill that area with every explosive we have. When enough of these things follow us in, we detonate. That's insane, someone muttered. That's correct, Jiho agreed. Hana, you ready? The pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Born ready, Captain. The plan was desperate and improvised, exactly the kind of tactics that made other species consider humans reckless. The Horizon's Promise and 3 patrol ships, the Incheon, the Daegu, and the Gwangju, moved into formation. They flew straight toward the largest concentration of flame entities, weapons firing not to damage but to attract attention. It worked. The firestorms turned, flowing through space toward these new targets. Up close, Jiho could see they weren't just flames. They had forms inside the fire. Wings, claws. Faces that might have been beautiful once before they became pure destruction. "They're following," Hana reported, her fighter dancing between streams of fire. "Debris field in 30 seconds. Taemin worked frantically, arming the charges he'd scattered through the wreckage. "This is either brilliant or suicide." "Often both," Jiho muttered. "All ships maximum speed. Get clear when I give the signal." They raced through the debris field, the firestorms close behind. Metal groaned as the Horizon's Promise scraped past a destroyed hull. Hana pulled maneuvers that should have torn her fighter apart. The patrol ships weaved and dodged, keeping the entities focused on them. "Now!" Jiho roared. All 4 ships hit maximum thrust, rocketing clear of the debris field. Behind them, Taemin triggered the charges. Space lit up with explosions. Not the silent vacuum detonations of regular space combat. These explosions roared with released energy, chain reactions tearing through the wreckage. The firestorms caught in the center howled, an impossible sound that somehow reached through the vacuum into every ship's hull. Several entities winked out of existence. Others writhed, wounded but not destroyed. The main swarm remained, but humanity had proven something important. These things could be hurt. Across the galaxy, 1 billion beings watched the tactical feeds in shocked silence. The primitive humans, barely spaceworthy, had accomplished what the Vrellan fleet could not. They had made the Ashborn swarm bleed. In the concordant council chambers, the debate suddenly became much more urgent, and on the Horizon's Promise, Captain Jiho stared at the surviving entities and thought about ancient myths, old legends, and the stories his grandmother used to tell about fighting monsters with nothing but courage and cleverness. "Doyen," he said slowly, "get me someone who knows about Earth's mythology. We're going to need an expert."